All right, so now that you guys have a good idea of how we can unit test, let's go ahead and go back to our old code. So I'll go into the users module, and let's go ahead and try to write some unit tests for some of these. And we've actually written unit tests for the controllers. Let's actually write a unit test for a controller and a service. So let me see if I can find a good method that we can write a significant test for. I think, yeah, let's go ahead and do this. Let's write a unit test for the method that creates the user. So you can see right over here for the user's controller. Like I said, the logic over here, it doesn't really do much. So if we write a unit test for this, the only thing that we'd really be, testing is just ensuring that user service.createUser was called with a DTO. And like I said, because we had the validation pipe, it's going to take care of that for us. And if we wanted to actually ensure that the validation is working, you would just use an end-to-end test, which, like I said, we'll do that in a separate video. So let's go ahead and skip the test for the controller, and let's just go right into testing the service for users. So that's this class right over here. So it seems like I didn't actually create the actual test, the test file. Oh, actually, it's right over here. Okay, perfect. Okay, so let's go ahead and test out a user. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to go ahead and exit this, and I'm just going to do yarn test watch. And I'm going to do users.service.spec.ts, and you're going to see that it should throw an error because we are missing a dependency. Yep, you're going to see that it says Nest cannot resolve dependencies of user service. And so inside user service, remember, we have a repository. So we're going to have to actually mock out, or not mock out, but like we're going to have to provide that to our testing module. So the way we can provide repositories, it's a little bit trickier, but I'll show you guys how we can do that. Okay, so what we do is let's provide the actual user service. So we have the user service over here, and remember, we're not mocking the user service, we're trying to test it. But what we're going to do after the user service is we're going to provide the actual repository. So we can do that by first getting the repository token. So that's a method from NestJS TypeORM package. And next, we're going to go ahead and provide the actual user entity. So you'll see that right over here, it's user entity, but over here it's user. The reason why it's user entity over here is because we have a conflicting naming, because I have an interface called user and I have a class entity called user. So I just renamed it to entity, but they're really the same thing. It's really the same token. Okay, because remember, NestJS keeps track of all of its dependencies using a token. Okay. So once we do that, we just need to mock out certain methods that we're going to call on the repository. So you can see right over here, we do call several methods such as create and save and find one. So what I'll do is I'll go ahead and call, or not call, but I'll for use value, we'll assign this to be an object, and we're going to go ahead and mock out the methods. So we call create, so let's mock that out. So let's just do just.fn. We'll also go ahead and mock out, let's see, .save, so just.fn. And then we'll also mock out find one as well. Okay, so that should, first let's just make sure. So you can see that the default test case that we have, so everything is passing. And that's a good sign. That means that the actual dependencies are working just fine. And what we're going to do now is we want to actually get an instance of the actual repository. So what I'll do is I'll just call this user repository, and we'll type annotate this as a repository. And since it's generic, we'll specify that it is a user type. Okay. And then what we'll do is similar to how we have it set up over here, where they are retrieving the actual user instance, because this is how we're going to actually be able to call the methods on the service. We're going to go ahead and get the user repository instance. So we'll call module.get, and we'll type annotate this to be a user repository. And then we're going to go ahead and pass in that token. So we can simply just call get repository token and pass in user. Like that. Let me actually do this const user repository token. So that way I don't have to keep calling this over and over again. Because really, this is just, yeah, there we go. I think it returns a string, or, yeah, string or function. So let me just go ahead and pass that there. There. Okay, so let's go ahead and I'll just go ahead and just write another test that just checks to see if user repository is defined. Whoops. Okay, so let's run the test and let's make sure. Let's see what's going on over here. Oh wait, whoops. I didn't mean to do that. I meant to provide the token, not the get user repository. Okay, there we go. So let's just make sure that, yep, both tests pass. That means the user repository was actually found in the container. Now, if we actually provide the incorrect token, it won't actually get it for us. So let's say, for example, if I were to, just like pass in a random token, it's going to say user repository is not defined. Okay, so it's important that you have the correct token. And if you want to see what the token looks like, we can console log it. And let's see what it ends up logging. It should just say user. Yeah, user repository. Okay, there we go. Okay, and that's how NestJS can find the dependency from the container. All right, so enough talk about that. Let's go ahead and actually test our code. So what we're going to do is we're going to go ahead and test this create user method. So what we want to do is we want to pass in a create user DTO. And remember, we're not mocking create user, we're testing that method. So we're not going to mock it at all. We're going to call that method, and what we're going to do is we are going to actually mock other functions such as encode password, create, and save. Now, we actually have not mocked encode password yet. So since we actually have a separate file that has this encode password, we're actually going to go ahead and spy on that method. So to do that, well, first let's do this. Let's go ahead and call the method first. Let's do one thing at a time. So let's go ahead and describe create user. And let's go ahead and write a test case. So let's just make sure that the actual user is created, I guess. We don't really have much, there's really not much logic that's going on over here. Like I said, all we're really doing is just calling encode password, calling create, and calling save. So what I'll do is I'll go ahead and let's see, let's do it should, let's see, create a new user with encoded password. So we'll definitely have to mock encode password because a function like, so if you guys didn't see that episode where I showed you guys how to hash the password, well, first of all, let's take a look at what encode password does, okay? So encode password is going to hash the password, and this is a function that really, it returns a non-deterministic value, and what that means is we don't really know what the value is. Okay, it can really, the behavior of that function can really be, it can output some kind of different value every single time. Okay, so it's non-deterministic. So the behavior is very different based off of things such as the password, the salts. Okay, so it's very important to understand that. So we don't really want to let the library take care of that. We want to actually mock out the encode password method. So the way that I would test this is, let's see, so should create a user with encoded password. So what this means is that, one, we need to make sure that the encode password returns an actual value and doesn't throw any error. Two, when we call create, we want to make sure that create is called with the correct parameters. So we'll ensure that it's called with the correct username, email, and the correct encoded password, which we're going to mock out. And we'll also make sure that save is called with the correct parameters as well. So let's go ahead and do that. Whoops. So it's going to be an async function. Okay. So let's go ahead and just call create user. So we'll do await. Let's see, service, create user. And we're going to pass in the user DTO. So I'm just going to manually pass it in. Username, we'll do Anson. Email, we'll do anson@gmail.com. And then for the password, we'll do password is 123. And like I said, none of these method calls are going to really, it's not going to hit the pipes. Like I said, let end-to-end testing take care of that. Okay, so you can see that this test case passes. Okay, but let's make sure that it's actually going to call the correct value. So right now, notice how we didn't mock encode password. So what happens underneath the hood is it should actually log something. Yeah, you can see that right here it logs the hash. Okay, we're actually gonna mock out encode password. So what I'll do is up top over here, we're gonna go ahead and import asterisk as helpers, or let me do bcrypt util from, and we're gonna have to import that from the let's see, it's going to come from util slash bcrypt. So now I can call these methods if I want to by referencing bcrypt utils. Okay, you can think of this as importing it as an object, so we can call their methods independently. Okay, and the reason why I'm going to do this is I'm going to spy on the methods so I can mock the implementation. So for example, we're going to go and call just let's spy on bcrypt utils. We're going to spy on, let's see, it should allow me to spy on, let me see, I should be able to spy on the encode password method. Hopefully it doesn't give me much issues. Okay. And then what we'll do is we'll mock the implementation, or mock, let's see, let me just double check this real quick. This is a synchronous function. So we'll just do mock return value once, and I'll just mock it as hash123. Okay. So let's take a look at what happens. Now you can see in the console log, it actually returns hash123, or it logs hash123, and that's because we mocked the encode password to return hash123. So it's working expectedly. And what we're going to do is we're going to go ahead and let's just write a couple of assertions. So like I said, there's not much that's going on here, because if anything fails, it's either going to be bcrypt that fails, it's going to be either the database call that fails, but that can be handled at the control level. So now what we're going to do is we're going to go ahead and write a couple of assertions, and the assertions that we're going to write are going to be pretty straightforward. So we're going to go ahead and expect encode password to have been called with 123. So this will tell us that the passwords that are being, the password that the user is sending, and the controller is taking that password, taking that DTO and calling the service, it's allowing us to know that the service is actually, the service method is getting the correct password value, okay? And we're actually calling encode password with the correct password value as well. So let's go ahead and write an assertion. So expect bcrypt utils dot compare passwords, or not compare, sorry, encode password. And since we spied on it, this is going to go ahead. We don't have to really do anything with mocking it, because we already written a spy on this. So now what we can do is we can expect this to have been called with 123. So basically, whatever we passed in for this value for password when we called create user, that's what we're going to pass in here. So this should pass, and you can see that it passes. And if I were to pass in an invalid value, it should fail. And that is the whole point of writing unit tests, is we know for a fact that whatever we're passing in to create user, it's the correct value is being passed into encode password. Okay, and because we don't actually want to call the bcrypt API methods, we mock it out. Okay, so now let's go ahead and write another assertion. So let's just expect the repository. And actually, you know what? It's actually better practice to put one assertion per test. So let's do that, because right now what we're doing with this test is we're just saying that it should create a user with encoded password. I think it's better if we actually rename this. Let's just say it should encode password correctly. Even though that's not really the concern of the service, that's really a concern of bcrypt, but we'll just name that for now. So now that we know that test case is going to pass, let's go ahead and say should call a user repository create with correct correct params. There's probably a better way we can name this, but we'll worry about that later. So let's go ahead and do this. So let me see. So here's what I'll do. I'll actually move this spy into over here. Let me just make sure everything passes. Okay. So that way, every single test, it's going to go ahead and mock the value. It's going to mock the return values of hash123. Okay, so let's go ahead and call create user again. Okay, and then instead of asserting the bcrypt utils.encode password, we'll go ahead and assert the user repository. So user repository.create. So expect, and remember we have that instance right up top over here because we got it from the container. So expect user repository, and remember we also mocked the user repositories methods. So we're going to go ahead and assert that create was called with the correct parameters. So to have been called with. So let's go ahead and pass in the correct values. So we're gonna expect it to have been called with username of Anson, email of Anson@gmail.com, and for the password, remember, is we're trying to assert that it's being called with the hashed password. So we're not gonna pass 123, but we're gonna pass hash123. And this unit test is going to tell us that we're actually creating the entity with the actual hashed password and not the raw password. So we can feel more confident when we're saving new users to a database that we can assure that the actual hashed password is being saved, not the raw password. So let's see. Right now, okay, so you can see that right over here, it's actually giving us the hash password. So it seems like, I think actually, let's do this. Oh yeah, I think maybe, let me do this. Let me try. I think it's because this is only going to mock it once and it's going to reflect for this. Let me actually see if I can do this. Let me try mock return value instead. And let's see if that will apply for all of our tests. And if it doesn't, okay, so it does. Okay, good. So, okay, good. That's perfect. Okay, yeah. So before it seems like mock return value once only worked for the first test, but we want it to apply for all these other tests, so that's good. Okay, so you can see that it should call repository.create with correct params. And we can also, let me see. We can also write another assertion too. So let's say, for example, we can also write another assertion. Let me see. User repository.create. You can also do expect user repository.create to return with. And this should return, this should actually return us with an entity. Let me show you how it looks like. This test should fail. Let's see. Oh yeah, you know what? It's not going to do that. The reason why is because, let me see. Because we have this mock return nothing. So let me do this. Let me do new user. X. It will let me do that. Seems like it won't let me do that. And I think it's because, we don't have a constructor inside our entities, so that's not going to work. Okay, that's fine. We don't have to worry so much about that. We can just leave it alone for now. But what I was thinking is what you could do is you can actually mock the return value of create, so that it actually returns the new user. But like I said, we can handle that with we can worry about that when it comes to end-to-end testing. Okay, and let's go ahead and write another test case for save, so that way we don't have. I mean, you could honestly put these assertions all in one test, but it's better to isolate them. Okay, so let's go and do this. Instead of asserting user repository.create, let's make sure that user repository is called with the correct values. So let's do that. So you should see that this test should pass. It seems like it failed. Let's see. So why did it fail? So it seems like, okay, I think I know why. So the reason why is because new user is undefined. So what we could do is we can also just mock out the return value. So I think what I'll do is this. Let's see, user repository.mock, or let me do this just spy on. Will let me? I don't think it'll let me spy on this. I think I should be able to. Yeah, let me do that. So let me go and mock the implementation once. Let's go right here. Okay, let me mock the, or not implementation, sorry. Let me mock the resolved value or return value. Okay, and what I want to return is whatever the entity is going to return. So I think when you create the entity, it doesn't actually have the ID. We can actually just write this out. So let me just do this. Let's go in here. Oh, so it seems like it actually does have an ID. So it seems like it does actually have an ID. Okay, yeah, so we'll have to explicitly define an ID. Okay, and then we can just do that. So that should fix that for us. Hopefully. Okay, there we go. So yeah, the reason why it failed before was because it was undefined. But now that we mocked it out, that's good. And like I said, we're really just ensuring that .save is called with the correct parameters. So we're ensuring that it's called with the hash password, not the actual, like raw password. Okay, so that's pretty much good enough when it comes to unit testing this create user method. And that's how you can, play around with the API. You can play around with mocking stuff and, mocking certain return values once. So it's a good way on how to actually mock stuff out. So yeah, hopefully this video made a lot of sense. In the other videos, we only focus more on just, testing controllers and services. But here, we're actually mocking out the repositories, the repository methods. And if you understand how this works, you can really mock realistically anything. Okay, so hopefully that made a lot of sense. I think in the next video, what we'll do is we'll probably get started with end-to-end testing. I definitely want to show you guys how that works, so we can at least see how end-to-end testing works in NestJS. I think this should give you guys a basis of how we can test our code, unit test our code. Like I said, you don't want to do too many things when it comes to unit testing. The whole point of unit testing is isolating every single method and ensuring that that method does what it needs to do. And you do that by mocking out and stubbing out certain parts of your method. You can see that in create user, we mock out the repository methods because we know that these repository methods are going to work because that's an external library that we installed, so they should work. Okay, but we're not concerned about, that. We're concerned about our code itself. So that's going to be pretty much it for this tutorial. So I'll see you guys in my next video. Peace out.